Hi again, biology. This is Mrs. Cozen. This is your second set of notes for Unit 2, Biochemistry. Let's title this one Video 2, Macromolecules. Starting off, here's all the key vocabulary that you are going to see in this part of the notes. I know it looks like a lot, but we go through it pretty quickly. Remember, you don't have to write this part down, but this is a good idea to study when you are looking at your quiz, which will probably be sometime next week. All right, so let's talk about chemical bonds. That's what this whole unit is about. How do you guys get the energy to do all the things that you do? So the first thing that you need to know is that we can store energy in chemical bonds of both living and non-living things. Obviously, you guys are living things, hopefully, unless any of you guys have turned into zombies since the last time I saw you, you're living things. So the things that, the energy that you need, you get from the chemical bonds in your body, in your carbs, in lipids, in nucleic acids, in your protein. That's where we get all the energy that we need. But there are non-living things that also can store energy. Think one example, a nuclear bomb. There are chemical bonds in a nuclear bomb when we go through nuclear fusion or fission, any kind of nuclear energy. That's a non-living thing that stores energy. When we break bonds, we absorb energy. Now, I know that you guys may have heard that breaking bonds releases energy. Like when we break the bonds in a carbohydrate, it helps to release energy. But I want you guys to kind of push that misconception aside for right now. To actually break a bond, think about when you break something. If you take a big stick and you try to break it, you actually have to put energy in it to make that happen. So breaking bonds for our purposes right now, the bonds that we're trying to break, are absorbing energy. Whereas making the bonds helps to release energy. So when you make a chemical bond, when you create one, it takes this extra energy that was being used by both atoms in let's say a molecule, and that energy is released because now it's not necessary, because the energy that was in our electrons is now being used together to hold our atom together. So for our purposes, remember that breaking bonds absorbs energy and making bonds releases energy. So making bonds really helps us to release the energy that we need. When we go through metabolism and we process the materials that we take in, when we make new bonds, we help to release the energy that we need. Okay, monomer, think mono means one, okay? These are single molecules that can be bound together to form polymers. Mono means one. So this one is the smaller thing that we're going to start talking about. You guys are going to learn monomers for all of our macromolecules. Polymer, think many, poly. Polymers are large compounds formed by many monomers put together. And examples are our four macromolecules: proteins, lipids, carbs, nucleic acids. Memorize those right now, okay? I'll say it again. Memorize all four: proteins, lipids, carbs, nucleic acids. You'll need to know all four of those. Okay, let's start with carbohydrates. It's probably the easiest one to remember. You guys have heard of carbs. They're our main source of energy. Now, carbohydrates are in all kinds of things. Don't just think pasta and sugar. We find carbohydrates as a molecule in almost all of the food that we consume. So our, oh, sorry, I went backwards a little bit. Okay, our polymer is carbohydrates. That's just a real general term. An example of a monomer that would make that up would be a monosaccharide. So monosaccharide, one sugar. When I put many of these monomers together, guess what I get? A polysaccharide. Okay, so your monomer, monosaccharide, when I put a whole bunch of those together, I get a polysaccharide. And that's just common sugar that you guys see all in throughout your body. Don't think like the white granulated sugar that you see in the bag at the grocery store that you bake with. That's something that's a little bit different. Okay, lipids. This is my macromolecule. This is my polymer, and it's made up of monomers called fatty acids and glycerol. Now, the function of lipids are to store large amounts of energy. Think about when we have fat in our body. We all have fat in our body. that layer between our skin and our muscle, it's there to store extra energy. So when we take in extra energy, when we take in extra food and we can't process it, where do we store it? Our body stores it as lipids or fats, saving it up for a rainy day. And the monomers that make that up are called fatty acids and glycerol. Sorry, guys. Okay, so that's my polymer, that's my monomer. All right, now 2 examples of types of lipids that you need to know about are saturated and unsaturated fats. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature. Think saturated solid, saturated solid. Examples of that would be margarine, that yellow stuff you guys find in the tub, your country crock that's maybe sitting in your fridge right now, the butter that comes in, butter or margarine that comes in a stick that you might bake with, those are saturated fats. Other examples would be animal fat, like lard. Those stay saturated at room temperature. Crisco, if you guys have ever seen in the big blue can, it's a white vegetable oil. It's a saturated fat. It's basically a solid vegetable oil. Now, unsaturated fats are not solid. They're unsolid. They're liquid at room temperature. Examples are vegetable oil, olive oil, mineral oil, anything that stays liquid at room temperature is an unsaturated fat. Protein. Here's my polymer. Here's my monomer. Raw materials for growth and repair. Protein are what your body uses to build everything that it needs. We talk a lot about protein as a building block for living things. And the monomer, when you put multiple amino acids together, you get protein. Think of protein as the frame of your body. Not so much the skeleton, but the frame that all your cells and all your skin and everything is built around is around protein. Nucleic acids. Nucleic acids, think DNA, DNA. They contain genetic material, directions to build living things. The DNA is short for deoxyribonucleic acid, and that's where you have all the directions for who you are. Your DNA contains all the directions for everything you need in your body, all the DNA that got passed down to you from your parents. And we create that with little parts called nucleotides. So the monomer is a nucleotide. Those are my small little building blocks. Then the polymer is a nucleic acid. Now, the way that we take monomers and turn them into polymers or build them is called dehydration, synthesis, or condensation. Now we call it, these are 2 different words for the same thing. We call it dehydration and condensation because water comes out of it. So when we take the monomers and we put them together, hydrogens and oxygens that were holding the monomers together on either side are now released because the monomers don't need those hydrogens and oxygens anymore to build polymers. And so what happens is those hydrogens and oxygens are released as water. So our monomers are dehydrated, or water is condensed out of our chemical reaction. So dehydration makes, remember, dehydration makes. Okay, then hydrolysis is the other one. Hydrolysis takes my big polymers and breaks them down into monomers. So with hydrolysis, we have to actually put water in. The reason it's called hydrolysis is we're putting water back onto the monomers. We're adding water to the monomers. That's why it's called hydrolysis. So hydrolysis breaks. So there's my saying, dehydration makes monomers into polymers. Hydrolysis breaks polymers down into monomers. And that, my friends, is the end of video 2, monomers and polymers.